2-Minute Theology, Georgia Martyrs, Discovery of the Ancient Mission. Last video we talked about our 5 Franciscan martyrs and what led to their death and the uprising of Juanillo. But the Wali natives lived on St. Catherine's Island for over 100 years in peace. And this was 1597 when our martyrs were executed, but St. Catherine's lasted until 1680. And Dr. David Hurst Thomas, who I mentioned in the last video, is the archaeologist who was studying the California missions, and he said, I know in Georgia there were missions there. There were Franciscan missions, but there's nothing remaining. And so in 1977, he and his archaeological team came down to St. Catherine's Island, and they figured St. Catherine's was their best opportunity to find the mission because it was a finite location, being on an island. Here's Dr. David Hurst Thomas, who I've had the opportunity to join on pilgrimage 2 times at St. Catherine's. We exchanged a number of emails, and he's taught me so much about their efforts to uncover what was lost for over 300 years. People had known about the mission, but for 300 years, no one was able to locate it. So Dr. Thomas arrives 1977, and it takes them 5 years. And St. Catherine's Island is 14,000 acres. It's about 25 football fields. And they were searching very meticulously, but you have to be very careful when you're digging into ancient ground so as not to destroy any of the artifacts or not to destroy any clues. And what happened is they decided to look at the 2 main aquifers on the island and said, okay, well, maybe, the mission was set up near the aquifers, a natural water resource. And they found a Spanish well. It was 3 barrels from the ship that came over, turned upside down, and they had used this to make a well. So they knew that they were close by to the mission church. One of the difficult things, though, is they weren't building the church out of stone or brick. They were using all natural resources: pine, mud, sand, leaves. And so the church, when it decays, it blends in just like the rest of the environment. There's no way to kind of identify what was the church, what was just natural decay, except for the fact that the church burned down. And Dr. Thomas explains it's like putting something into a kiln, and it just solidifies. So when it burned down, everything was pointing radioactive north. However, it fell over, and all the radioactivity was facing every different direction. And he knew that, okay, we believe this is where the mission site is. And he discovers the western wall of the church. It took them 5 years to find. They discovered the church. They had a plaza. There was a kitchen. They were building a convent. There were streets. It was, as he describes, a classic Spanish town blueprint on St. Catherine's Island, just 20 miles from here, where over 1,000 Wali Catholics lived for over 100 years in relative peace. And he made a phone call in 1984 to Bishop Lessard, and he said, I found something that belongs to you. And Bishop Lessard says, well, what is it? Dr. Thomas says, it's the oldest church discovered in this country, and it's Catholic. And Bishop Lessard and Dr. Thomas and their team began to have discussions about how they would proceed. And one of the things that Dr. Thomas came to find was that under the church was also a cemetery. And there were 482 natives that received Christian burial under the church. And Dr. Thomas, of course, asked Bishop Lessard how he should proceed. Was he allowed to kind of investigate here very carefully and then returning the bodies at peace as they were? And Bishop Lessard gave them permission, and Dr. Thomas, through this research on St. Catherine's Island, has the largest collection of historical artifacts, beads, jewelry, accessories of the 15th and 16th century, more than any other discovery in our country combined. So this was an incredible find for Dr. Thomas and their endeavors here to find the mission church. And so they found the exact location of the church, they found the door, they found where the altar was, they even found what they believed to be were stations of the cross, which is actually interesting that were depicted with the Wally features here. So it's very, very, very interesting discoveries. And they used a helicopter to fly over and give them a greater observation. They found a walkway that had been beaten down over 100 years of crushed shells, where people were walking in procession to this mission church. Just another picture here. This is the church, and they have since planted trees, 12 trees surrounding what would have been the exact structure of the church. And you can go there and visit it today. As I mentioned, I've been on several pilgrimages there and was able to offer Holy Mass in October. So one of the things that we see happen with this mission is that 1680, the Spanish are being pushed out by the English colonizers, and the Spanish leave St. Catherine's in 1680, and then it was burned down, I believe, 1704. And this is why all the Spanish missions that were once here and thriving were lost, until some of the great work done by men like Dr. David Hurst Thomas and his team, and all the archaeological students that still come to St. Catherine's and are still finding artifacts. So it's a rich treasury of our ancient history here on Georgia soil just down the road. So in our next video, we're going to look at the cause for canonization and how someone goes from being a martyr to being a canonized saint in the Catholic Church, especially for our 5 Franciscan martyrs. God bless y'all.